Hi, this is Steve Bragg, and I'm going to be doing a review of a trek through Iceland, which a group of us did in July of 2013. So we're starting off in the northeast corner of Iceland and doing a high-speed 360 turnabout of what the area looks like where we were starting. We're going off on a trip which covers 3 huts in a fairly new hut system that Iceland installed a short time ago. You might notice everyone is wearing parkas. This is the middle of the summer, but really it's not exactly warm out. Temperatures are generally in the 50s. Also, very few trees, mostly moss. You'll notice here about 6 inches deep in moss as far as you can see in all directions. And also, a little bit further down the trail, still on our first day, you'll notice some driftwood, which clearly came from somewhere else, because I don't see any trees in the area where they could have come from. And our first night's lodging is just around the corner, which looks like this. A couple of people are camping out, including me, that's me in the foreground, and the hut, and they all look about the same as that green one in the middle. Now, if you go inside, it's pretty nice. These are cozy, so you'll see a couple of dozen people sitting around waiting for dinner. You'll notice because their bowls are empty. But if we pan around to the left, you'll find our 2 guides. That's Helgi in red and Jan in the blue are preparing dinner, and then the rest of us would clean up afterwards. And also, as we pan around a bit further, you'll notice a nice potbelly stove with a fire going, which is kind of nice since it's pretty cold out. Also, upstairs, if you choose to sleep inside the hut, it's pretty cozy. If you don't like people snoring, this is a problem. You can see everyone is pretty much elbow to elbow with gear spread out everywhere. So the next day, this is Iceland after all. Middle of summer doesn't matter. Here you see about 6 to 8 feet of snow on either side of one of the passes we went through. And sometimes there aren't bridges, so we have to do a fording. And so you put on your slippers or whatever you're going to be using for the water crossing and go for it. Now, I noticed the guy in black there, the assistant guide Jan, is singing Icelandic sagas, apparently to make us feel better as we freeze our feet off. Also, the following morning, here's our next hut. Looks pretty much like the last one. We have the outhouses to the left, which also include showers and a drying room. And there's the hut again. Pretty nice day, though of course that will change shortly as the clouds move in. And here we are at a high pass a few miles down the road. And what you're about to see is a fair amount of wind, which is pretty common. After all, there are no trees to break the wind. And that's the direction we're heading right there. And there's me showing a complete lack of color sense, pure black. And here's lunch. We get to sit in the moss, which is quite comfortable. And there's our lead guide, Helgi, chopping up some salmon for us for sandwiches. Now, there are lots and lots of streams to cross. Some of them have small bridges on them, like this one. This bridge is maybe 1.5 feet wide. And the traditional approach, you would think, is to walk on top of the bridge, as these 2 people are doing. However, there are some alternative ways of going about this. For example, you could try to do it from the bottom up. Here's assistant guide Jan, who has strange views of how to climb things or hike things, and doing it from underneath. So this is, I suppose, a good way to do some fishing while you're down there. At any rate, he's thought better of his approach, and now he's backing up, and so much for that idea. The more common approach most of the time, though, is simply to jump across a stream. Now, this next one is pretty typical. This was the following day in an adjacent valley. Fairly high volume of water, but the streams aren't really that wide. So as Jan is demonstrating right here, you just run up to it and jump across, and on you go. And that's maybe a dozen or so of those per day. That concluded the trekking, so at that point we switched to looking at waterfalls, and there are thousands of them all over the country, of which this one is pretty typical. Also, while driving between waterfalls, we happened to notice one of the farms where they grow Stay Puft marshmallows. Really big ones, a couple of feet wide. All right, actually that's just hay bales covered in white plastic, but they look like Stay Puft marshmallows. And one of our other stops was a local lagoon on the south coast of Iceland, where you can go inland into the lagoon to see icebergs, which calve off of a local glacier. And there's a lot of them. It's really quite an entertaining half hour or so out on the water. So, how do you get there? You get on one of these rather dorky-looking boats, motorized, which go inland with everybody on it and then drop into the water. Notice the little wooden landing stage right there, pretty informal, and that's how you get on and off these convertible boats. There are also any number of glaciers along the south coast where you can drive it up and take a look. This one is special because the movie Batman Begins had a scene filmed here involving a monastery, supposedly in Tibet, when they actually built the monastery there and burned it down. They also have their share of black sand beaches. I'll avoid any phallic comments regarding that little spire of rock sitting out there and simply point out that the beach is black. It's actually quite cold also. Now, maybe the most famous waterfall in the country is the Skogafoss waterfall, which I'm undoubtedly mispronouncing, but it is a beauty. It's about 2 hours southeast of the capital. And if you hike up around the right-hand side of that waterfall, you also get up on top and can look down, which is equally beautiful. And despite the 10 minutes of agonized hiking, it's really worth the effort. Very, very, very pretty. Now, about a half mile to a mile down the road from here is a very nice museum which covers a lot of things about Iceland. We were lucky enough to get the 92-year-old founder of the museum to give us a short tour. And here we see him going into the chapel, which is on the premises of the museum. So we head on inside with our intrusive camera and follow him up to the front, where he then jumped on an organ and went through a couple of hymns for us. Picture yourself being in this good shape at the age of 92. And also view yourself trying to do this while someone sticks a camera in your face, as my wife Melissa is currently doing. There we go. And our final video from this trip is another waterfall not too far away. This one's a little different because there's a trail that goes around the backside of the waterfall. We're not going to go all the way through this because there's a lot of spray that gets onto the lens of the camera, but you can see the amount of volume of water coming down, which is really pretty impressive. And yes, you certainly do need a raincoat for this one, but the trail goes all the way through and out the back side of this waterfall. Very nice. And that concludes our trekking in Iceland. Hope you enjoyed the videos.